So I just spent the past couple of months stuck in bed with what could best be described as a very persistent case of mono, and in that time I ended up watching a lot of movies and TV shows that I hadn't seen in a while. Some of the movies that I found myself rewatching included Jim Carrey's Liar Liar, Adam Sandler's Big Daddy, and the subject of today's video, Forgetting Sarah Mashall. Forgetting Sarah Mashall is a movie that came out in the midst of what I like to consider a renaissance for raunchy comedy. It released at the end of the 2000s, which also brought us movies like Superbad, The Hangover, and Tropic Thunder. For a lot of us, it's probably not that hard to think back to this time in movie history, but it is worth designating this as one of the last times that movies like these were, for lack of a better term, mainstream. That's not to say that movies like these aren't still getting made, but there's no denying that they're a bit harder to come by and that they tend to get a smaller budget and less marketing. Anyway, Forgetting Sarah Mashall was written by and stars Jason Segel of How I Met Your Mother fame. He plays a television composer that's going through a breakup with the titular Sarah Mashall.
Please don't go.
Why don't you just put on some clothes and we can sit down and discuss
No,
this?
I can't do anything right now.
I'm so sorry, Pete.
And in a bid to get away from things, tries to go vacationing in Hawaii. Only when he gets there, he finds out that he's staying at the same resort as his ex and her new rock star boyfriend, Aldous Snow. Hate when that happens. He also meets a receptionist at the hotel named Rachel, who quickly tries to help him get over Sarah. And then, hijinks ensue because it's a rom-com. So why am I talking to you about this movie today? I mean, aren't video essays usually about more prestigious pictures than your typical 2000s R-rated comedy? Well, yeah, you're absolutely right, and I won't refute that, but it's my video. Let me do me. When I rewatched Forgetting Sarah Mashall, I was actually pretty surprised by how smart this movie was in comparison to other romantic comedies. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's high art or anything, but I do think that Forgetting Sarah Mashall is, for the most part, a structurally sound movie that deserves some props. And while I was watching it, I had an idea about the movie that I thought would be fun to explore. And that, my friends, is the magic of typecasting. In its simplest terms, typecasting is the practice of hiring an actor for a role based purely off of the way they look, or a basic archetype for the sort of person they're known for playing. While it's often implied that typecasting is bad, there isn't actually anything wrong with it, and in a lot of ways, it's literally just seeing a character when you look at somebody. On its own, typecasting is a very common thing, and it's honestly not worth writing home about. So how is Forgetting Sarah Mashall any different? Well, besides featuring some great comedic typecasting, Peter and Sarah's relationship is actually a pretty good metaphor for bad typecasting, both in movies and relationships. While I had just described typecasting in the context of acting, it's basically just another synonym for judging a book by its cover, which basically means it can be applied to relationships and everywhere else in life. And for what it's worth, this isn't the only movie to ever do this. 500 Days of Summer also did this, and arguably did a better job with it. I'm just not making a video about 500 Days of Summer. We're doing a video about Forgetting Sarah Mashall because that's what I happened to watch. Sorry. When I say that Forgetting Sarah Mashall is about typecasting, what I'm really saying is that the film's main character, Peter, is kinda guilty of making love out of nothing at all. He spends a lot of the movie glorifying his relationship with Sarah and focusing on the ways that she was a good partner for him. It's something that we all do during a breakup, and we see this kind of glorification of her in the little details that he shares about his ex.
Brian, everywhere I look, I'm reminded of her, okay? She got me this, okay? Because I would always leave my cereal boxes open, and the cereal would get stale. And so one day I came home and she had this waiting for me, because it keeps my cereal fresh. And now I have the freshest cereal.
We've already seen that Peter isn't exactly great at keeping his apartment clean, as shown in the opening scene before Sarah broke up with him. So this detail implies that Sarah takes care of Peter and helps him keep his life organized. But while Peter is definitely responsible for overanalyzing minor gestures, like buying a plastic cereal container, Sarah is also somewhat responsible for keeping Peter from truly getting to know her and, in turn, him glorifying her. In the movie, we see that Sarah's a successful actor and that she tends to have soundbite-ready responses to questions about her and her career.
You alright?
Yeah. I mean, I've been waiting to take the next step, into features for a long time, so it's a really good thing.
This isn't The View. I mean, we can have an honest talk about this if you want.
And we also see that she's deeply insecure about herself and that she's also the jealous type.
I think that Hawaii is a place to escape for people who can't deal with the real world.
Yeah, you know, there's so few personal shoppers and pet therapists. Gosh, it's such a hard life.
Simply put, Peter had never recognized all of the ways that Sarah was probably a toxic partner because he didn't even really get to know her because of how infatuated he was with her. In fact, despite Sarah literally telling him that she was leaving him for someone else, he struggles to look past their time together and wants them to get back together.
If we end up getting back together, I want to have a few of them left. You're cool. No, please don't go. You have to go. Done!
And while I certainly don't blame him for that because that's something we can all relate to, in a lot of ways that's typecasting. Peter has literally convinced himself that Sarah is the only person out there for him. He's put her on a pedestal that's made her synonymous with the idea of a happy relationship. And until later in the movie, he's unable to acknowledge how she never really was the best partner for him and how she didn't love or support him the way he needed to be loved and supported, despite a lot of evidence proving it.
It's really good, Peter. I just don't understand it. I would just chalk it up to that. Please don't play it again, because I don't.
Just listen to it one more time and see.
But by meeting Rachel and getting to know her, Peter learns what a healthy relationship could actually be like, as well as how he never seemed to have that with Sarah. Which, that sounds bad. That sounds wrong. That sounds like a really messed... It sounds like we're just recasting people in our lives, and that just sounds really reductionist. I don't like that. Potentially sociopathic metaphor aside, Rachel is literally Sarah's counterweight in the movie. While Sarah's laser focused on her career and what's next for herself as an actor, Rachel's a lot more laid back and uninvolved in her future.
You ever think about going back home, finishing school, or?
No. I work at the hotel. Doesn't really have to be a future in that.
When Rachel and Peter hang out for the first time, we learn about how she moved to Hawaii for a guy she was dating, only to find out that he had been cheating on her, which is also an inverse of how Sarah cheated on Peter with Aldous. On top of that, while Sarah's passive-aggressive towards her ex and competitive over winning the breakup, Rachel is openly hostile towards her ex.
Motherfucker! Dipshit!
Rachel, what are you doing?
I thought I told you to stay back on your island!
Yeah, well, you know what?
The deal is over April 9th.
Ultimately, Rachel helps Peter grow as a person by being supportive of him and his totally awesome vampire musical, and Peter learns that Rachel is closer to the idyllic standard that he held Sarah up to, and that healthy relationships are built around actually getting to know each other and helping each other grow. And look, I get that this all sounds very anti-Sarah. I really do. So it is worth mentioning that Sarah does see things a bit differently from her point of view. At the end of the second act, we shift over to Sarah's point of view for a bit as she wails on Peter's shortcomings in their relationship. We learn that Peter was too in his head and that he would often refuse to leave his apartment or, for example, wear something other than sweatpants for an entire week.
You shall not pass!
That said, we also do see that Sarah does miss Peter despite that, and the next scene shows us that Sarah can be somewhat controlling when she forces Aldous to wear a Tommy Bahama shirt to dinner.
Oh no, not the shirt. Oh, take my eyes, but not the shirt. Yeah, that's pretty much what I believe, Sarah.
When you're done making jokes, are you gonna get a napkin?
Do you know what? I think I've improved it.
This can imply that Sarah's wanting Peter to be outgoing, and to quote her directly, her struggle with watching him drown has more to do with her trying to change who Peter fundamentally is, which is a dork and an introvert, and that she may not have his best interests at heart. In other, more cliche words, Sarah didn't like Peter, she liked the idea of him. Even worse, it shows that she never really respected Peter, let alone the fact that he's happy now that he's met Rachel. At the end of the day, Forgetting Sarah Mashall is just a good movie. I spent a lot of time talking about the film in a way that makes it sound a lot bigger and grander and more complex than it really is. Honestly, it's just a really solid R-rated comedy, and we don't get enough of those anymore. The movie has a fantastic cast, is goofy and giddily fun, and it has vampire Muppets. Like, vampire Muppets. What else could you want in a movie? Anyway, that's the end of today's video. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, leave a like, subscribe, comment, do whatever it is you do whenever you enjoy something on the internet. If you want to see some more cool stuff that I've done, feel free to. I've got a bunch of video essays on the channel. I also do a podcast called Media Obscura. We watch and talk about retro and obscure movies and television every week. Super laid back, super fun. If you have recommendations for an episode, also send them my way. Yeah, honestly, that's about it. I don't know. That's literally all I had in the chamber for today. So, bye.